That's got to be at least 50, 100,000 horsepowers right there. That's drag strips times and stuff. Join me on an epic adventure as I take my old ramp truck and modernize it by getting rid of this tired old 350 small block Chevy and putting in a nice LS swap. This truck's awesome. I haul everything under the sun with it, but it's tired. It's got no guts whatsoever. The motor's old. They never had that much to begin with. So with a nice 6.0 under the hood, this thing will be ready to get back to work, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do your own LS swaps every step of the way. Well, there it is. No motor. Good job, guys. Ghetto style. Got it out of there, though. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the actual swap itself, the LS that's going into the truck. Here we have a good old-fashioned junkyard 6.0 liter. You can tell by the 317 heads. When you're wandering through the junkyard, that's what you're looking for, that 317. If it says 708, 706, 340, blah, 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 anything but that, then you probably got a 5.3. And you don't want that. You want the torque of a 6.0 all day long. Now, these motors last for friggin' ever. You might have noticed by now I'm all about LS swap the world, but that's for a reason. It's because these things last. They prove performance every single time. And I'm not building a race car. I'm hauling crap in this shitty old truck. So do I need to build a $10,000, 8,000 horsepower madness machine? No, I'm gonna take a 150,000 mile LS motor, and I'm gonna show you some tricks to put this right in your vehicle, straight from the junkyard, just to make this thing last for another 100,000 miles. It's unreal how reliable these motors are. First off, if you're gonna take anything apart, you might as well redo all of your gaskets and everything. So since I'm redoing gaskets, oil pan, front timing cover, rear seal, things of that nature, I went ahead and replaced the oil pump. I'm gonna put on a new water pump so I don't have any issues with the cooling, and I went ahead and bought brand new front and rear covers because for like $10 more than just buying that seal, I can get a whole brand new one to throw on there. I mean, that just makes sense, right? I'm gonna throw in a new set of spark plugs and a new set of sensors all around. The cam sensor, the crank sensor, TPS sensor, the air idle control sensor, water temperature sensor. Why not a new Tough Guard filter up in there? And of course, oil pan gasket. So this thing won't be leaking oil all over the place anymore, which that's really all I care about. I don't care if the thing's got a little bit of blow by in there. LS walls are crazy. Like the cylinders in these things just last forever. I pulled apart motors that had 300,000 miles on them, and I couldn't tell the difference between that and a 100,000 mile motor to save my life. So I'm gonna do the basics just to keep this thing from leaking oil all over the place. I don't want a self-changing oil system. I want one that I need to change every 3,000 miles. Let's do it. LS swapping these 90s trucks has become super popular. Everybody's doing it. I wish they would have just come out with these a little bit earlier, man. The LS motor goes perfect in these trucks, and this is the best body style that they ever had on a mass production level. Now, if you're gonna put one of these into that, Here's a little secret. If you want to keep all your gauges and not have to change all that jazz, this oil pressure sensor is meant for the LS. You could change this out with a little adapter and put the exact same sensor that came out of your old crappy 350 right in that hole, and then plug it into the original wire. Same goes for water tint. You can't mess with that one because that controls the computer, that tells the air fuel ratio and mixed with the snippers here, so we can't change that out. However, LSs are cool. They come with an extra plug right here. It's like they knew you were gonna fuck with their motors, man. So you take this bad boy out, put you in an adapter, and you can put in that original sensor from the old truck, and then your gauge works in there as well. So you got your water, you got your oil pressure right there on the dash without changing anything. How neat is that? Our motor's sealed up tighter than a dolphin's butthole. She's watertight. Now let's talk about some transmission action. Old 4L80, new 4L80. Can you tell the difference? Hydromatic, automatic, systematic, it's all the same. So when you find your 4L80, hopefully you found it behind an LS motor already. Otherwise, you're gonna kind of have to guess. The new one is a lot different as far as what's going on inside of the thing, but on the exterior, it's pretty hard to tell the difference between the two. But if you got an LS out of the junkyard, it probably had a 4L80 behind it already. I took this in, had the band replaced, had the crutches replaced, seals, blah, 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 all that kind of basic stuff. I didn't do any hard parts. There was nothing wrong with this transmission. The truck ran and drove just fine beforehand, so no need to do an expensive $1,500 replacement. I got a cheap rebuild kit and just replaced the soft parts inside of this thing. So less than 500 bucks. This thing's pretty much brand new and ready to get back out on the road. Though I did a basic rebuild on the transmission, the torque converter is one thing you don't want to mess around with. Get a brand new torque converter, get a rebuilt one, whatever you want to call it. I luckily have a nice torque converter shop here in Tampa that builds these things at a great price, so I get a brand new torque converter in my rebuilt transmission. So good as new, ready to rock and roll. When you go to do your swap, odds are somebody makes a set of LS mounts to put right into whatever vehicle you're putting in. So these guys just bolt up to the LS and then they should line up with the OEM motor mounts in the frame of this old Chevy truck. However, these old clamshells here were off by just a skosh, so I had to do a little chippy chopping in order to narrow this thing up so that the mount would slide onto it easily. I didn't want to be fighting it too much, so just a little chippy chop and boom, those custom motor mounts work great. We got this 6.0 all prepped and ready to go into the truck, so let's do this thing. Next on the list, fuel pressure. The LS requires 58-60 PSI fuel pressure in order to work, right? The old TBI motor that was in the ramp truck back in the day only made like 14 pounds. So obviously the fuel pump that was in the tank wouldn't work. But rather than changing out my tank, doing all kinds of other stuff or modifying it, I'm simply taking the whole fuel system out of the tank and just replacing this little pump right here. It's just a regular GM pump out of a newer Silverado, Escalade, or whatever, and you just, boom, pop it into there, splice your wires, change out your plug, and then everything else stays the exact same. Even your plugs for your gauges and everything else all remain the same. Then when you get in here to your rest of your fuel system, I went with the Corvette regulator because I've got an intake that only has one fuel line on it. That means that the regulation system is somewhere in the fuel line. That's why I use the Corvette style regulator. It brings it in here, regulates the pressure, and turns the return right back here, right by the fuel gas tank. I don't need a bunch of fuel lines running all over the place. So from here, I run in a 6AN line and run that all the way up to the front of the truck, and bada boom, bada bing, we got gas to make this baby sing. We're not gonna talk about how I got into this position, but somehow I'm underneath my ramp truck. Here's the gas tank, no big deal. Most of you guys probably won't have the room to crawl underneath and do your thing. But here I am with my new setup, fuel pumps ready to go. I'm gonna put this baby in here, somehow, some way. Closing in on the end of the LS swap on the ramp truck. Wiring is getting done. Dusty's cranking it out. This stuff is some voodoo science I don't really understand, but basically you got a few options when it comes to your wiring. You can buy one of those crazy expensive Holley Terminator systems as a wiring harness, computer, and all that kind of jazz that supposedly tunes itself or whatever, and spend $3,500 or so to actually make your junkyard swap work. That seems pretty ridiculous since you're buying a junkyard swap for next to nothing. Why wouldn't you use what you got? A factory harness modified very simply, and a factory ECU tuned with HP tuners will perform perfectly for a junkyard transfer. There's no reason to get crazy or expensive with something that's basic like this. Even if you're doing cam swaps or, you know, small upgrades to it, just stick with the factory stuff. If you're going twin turbo, 2,000 horsepower, crazy, all that, then yeah, buy something really nice and fancy. But when you're doing a regular junkyard swap, use what you got. So I've got a modified harness. It's got all my relays that control everything, a main fuse panel for the actual ECU itself. So this is completely standalone. However, my wiring guy Dusty's awesome, so he integrated it into the truck, and everything still functions inside of the truck the way that it did from the factory. Probably better because everything was kind of haywire beforehand. Now I'm buttoning up the accessories, which is the last thing here. Accessories. When you do your swap, I stuck with the original truck stuff, so that means when I want to put my factory AC back on, I didn't even disconnect the lines. It's still charged. The AC is working, or should work, the way that it did before. So I had to get a bracket that matched the new LS motor. ICT Billet, fortunately, makes bazillions of different application brackets. I got one specifically for my truck, and it has to be the correct AC compressor, 508 style with the 4 bolts around on the outside of it. However, one thing they never mention when you buy these things is you can't use your factory truck tensioner. You have to use an LS1 style tensioner. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your AC swap into the LS swap. I'm gonna get this tossed on. Well, there it is, AC system. That's pretty cool. Speaking of cool, let's talk about the cooling system on your LS swap. The 90s trucks had a good radiator in them, but the models that came right after them, the 99 and up trucks, had a different radiator. They also had the option to get yourself some sweet little electric fans and get rid of that mechanical power drain inside of there, because we need more power, baby. So I put in a newer radiator out of a 2000 and up Escalade 3500 whatever shimmy Silverado thing, and boom, it fits right in there. Yeah, I did a little ghetto-ness with the old electric fan business here, a little zip tie action, and down at the bottom it's held in by the actual supports that are right there for the actual radiator to the electric fans. That's the way it's supposed to be built. Why not use them? And then I just added in a little fill port here because on the newer trucks, they would have a reservoir somewhere else in this, a coolant tank that is where you would fill in all your radiator fluid, whether you're running water or coolant or whatever you're doing. So for this, I just spliced my hose, which this is an actual GM later model Chevy truck hose. Didn't have to change anything about it. Lower hose, same deal, right off of a Chevy truck, fit right in here, pretty neat. I put on new transmission lines for the transmission cooler. I also reused the oil cooler fittings off of the LS, and they go obviously right into this LS radiator. That's thinking with your heads. Try to use as much LS related stuff as possible, and then all the threads, all the fittings, everything just kind of goes together. For the intake, some more coolness there. Got that super cool air coming off of the headlight and the computer over here. I'll probably build a little shield to try and get a little bit of the exhaust manifold heat away from this, but it doesn't really matter that much to me. And we put our mass airflow sensor, that real fine welding you see there. I'm so good at welding aluminum, man, let me tell you what. And that takes us right into our intake. So a cold air intake, not really, it's still getting hot air from the engine compartment, but you know, that's what all the speedy boys call a cold air intake. But that's it, that's your cooling system. Get yourself an LS radiator, or if you're building an old classic or something like that, I guarantee you somebody's got an LS radiator that fits your application. Go electric fans, get rid of that mechanical drain on there. That's gotta be at least 50, 100,000 horsepowers right there. That's drag strips times and stuff. So get rid of that thing, go electric. You know, that's the mandate by 2035. Everybody's gotta go electric, right? Everybody's still gonna do this right here. Everybody's gonna take those, come 2050, when everybody's electric cars break, they're gonna go to the junkyard, pull one of these out and put that in there. Just get ready for that. So that's it. I got a fresh battery in this old turd suckle. Let's see if old girl here wants to start up for us. This will be our first go around with this bad biscuit. She's beeping, that's a good sign, right? I hear the fuel pump. I see some stuffs. All right. Woo! Damn, listen to those open headers. And that, my friends, is why you do an LS swap. That was the very first prank since wiring this whole piece of junk up. Wow, fired right up. Try doing that in the old crappy carburetors, stuff like that. Woo! There you have it, an LS swap from start to finish. Yeah, I breezed over a couple of things there. If you got any real detailed questions, just hit me up in the messages down below, DM me, call me, whatever, you know, I'm always available. LS swaps are always my jam. They're really easy to do. I didn't dig too much into the wiring and stuff like that because there are a million resources out there for you guys to look up, get the exact schematics on how to do things for the exact motor you have, because there's a little bit of differences between all the years. But if you need help with any of it, hit me up. I love this stuff. Take it easy.